14 after 4, Trevor Jackson this afternoon. We're now 3 days into the truckie strike, but supermarkets don't seem to be showing the strain too much. Behind the scenes, retailers are doing what they can to keep products on the shelves, despite the threat to businesses the strike provides. Shopkeepers have emerged as an unlikely ally in the campaign. The Retailers Association is calling for the state and federal governments to create a task force with real teeth, as they say, to help sort out the road transport industry. Executive Director of the Retailers Association, Scott Driscoll, joins me now. Good afternoon, Scott.
Hello.
Scott, firstly, let's get this straight. The Retailers Association isn't supporting the truckies stop work at all. In fact, it's condemning the action. Is that right?
Absolutely. What these fringe group organisers are actually doing is uncalled for, we believe, and certainly it shows that the majority of drivers would agree and are not participating.
But your association's call for government action is effectively helping the trucking industry's campaign. Retailers are being hurt by the strike, so what's in it for you?
Look, supply surety and making sure that customers get what they want when they go into a retail outlet. Simple as that. We just wished that this group probably had have maintained their resolve with the rest of their industry, or even potentially come and spoken to us before they took this sort of action, and we could have lobbied government jointly. We certainly understand that there are issues, don't deny it, but to go about the sort of industrial terrorism that they're trying to inflict on retailers and consumers, two groups that can do nothing about their qualms with government, is not on.
Truckies are striking because of the government rules and regulations, but they're also protesting that retailers aren't passing on the price increases that came with higher petrol prices. Are retailers also addressing the aspect of drivers' concerns that you do have control over?
Trevor, let me sort of differentiate now. The Coles Woolworths duopoly, I think, are probably the people that these drivers have the biggest stick to wave at. Now, it's well known that those suppliers and those people in the supply chain with Coles, whether you be or Coles and Woolworths, whether you be farmers, drivers, suppliers, producers, are probably getting a same or a similar sort of margin on their goods or services as they got some years ago. And we all know prices have gone up, and certainly there needs to be something addressed there. But look, across the board as a retail sector as a whole, I don't think that that same allegation could be levelled to the independent operators who, by and large, are independent, just the same as some of these owner drivers are, and are probably maintaining very worthy relationships of a business nature with their suppliers, like the drivers.
So you're saying smaller retailers are doing the right thing by the drivers, and they are passing on the increased prices?
Look, in the main, I mean, most of the independent retailers who are members of ours are part of their community. They have to maintain viable prices, otherwise simply the deals that they've struck with their suppliers and service people would be dropped. And I think it's because they're hands-on in their business. They probably have personal relationships with many of the organisations that supply and deliver to them. But there's no doubt that the big guys, the Coles and Woolworths duopoly, certainly probably have something to answer for as far as passing on some of the gains that they seem to keep reaping.
All right. Well, you mentioned Coles and Woolworths. How much do the problems in the road transport industry have to do with the contrast of the two major supermarket chains with a large slice of the market and a trucking industry which is largely made up of owner-operators with numerous unions instead of just, say, one or two?
Look, I don't think having some sort of unilateral approach is always the best, but I just think if you've got segments in any industry, and certainly in the retail sector, the independent retailers are poles apart from the majors, and I would imagine that owner drivers in the transport industry would have quite dissimilar business interests and financial interests as somebody who might be an employee of a trucking company. But we have a lot of sympathy for these people. Let's not get this wrong. We understand that they're doing it tough. We understand petrol prices. They're not on an island. They're not on their own. Everyone is feeling the pinch in the supply chain, as are consumers. And frankly, they've just gone the wrong way about it. And to hold an industry to ransom and to hold consumers to ransom when they can't do a single thing to help their complaints or to push government back around the table with them and get some common sense being talked is just dead wrong.
But Scott, you've described Australia's road transport industry as a mess. Wouldn't a unilateral approach, i.e. one union or maybe at least just two unions, help resolve that so that there'd be more consistency across the board?
Look, I think The onus falls on government to get it right. I don't really think that, how people bring themselves together, who they choose to get to represent them, necessarily will deliver the right outcomes. What needs to occur, though, is government needs to take a position, needs to establish legislation and policy that is sustainable for the industry. I mean, there's transport ministers in each state, there's a federal transport minister. These are the people who basically have got the backup. I've had drivers write to me and email me over the last week because we have come out fairly firmly condemning this action, and I stand by that. But in no way do we detract from the fact that the government has dropped the ball. All governments have dropped the ball, and basically negotiations have stalled, and that's bad news. But this sort of industrial action doesn't solve the problem.
Scott, do you believe that the regulations that the government have imposed on drivers are just too demanding, that it makes it almost impossible for them to make a living outside of the increasing fuel prices?
Look, some of them are. I mean, I've spoken to both sides of this argument. Obviously, there are people within government who believe that the rules that they've put in place aren't onerous, that they're not over the top. Some of the fines that drivers are complaining about, they say, can eat up a week's pay. It's a tough balance. But in talking to the other side, certainly it would appear that this has lacked some degree of consultation, and that is what will get industries offside, where governments take a heavy-handed approach and then step back from the table. In Queensland, we've got the same issue going on with the electrical trades union. We've got virtually a rolling strike against business. Business is suffering again in Queensland because there's a dispute on pay between the state government and the electrical union. So, I mean, you've got this sort of thing that's rolling on, and if you actually look at what could occur there, if you've got a ban on repairing outages after hours for a food retailer, potentially mass spoilage of their stock, then you've got road transport issues in replenishment of your stock, you can see why the government really needs to get back around the table with some of these groups and get it together.
Executive Director of the Queensland Retail Traders Association, Scott Driscoll there. This is ABC Coast FM, it's 4:21.